All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Looks like a few of you have found the chat box. Happy to see that. Welcome to this skills clinic using movement and motion for quality of life. Skills clinics, for those of you that aren't familiar with them, are one of our core community education programs that we offer at Alzheimer's San Diego. Back when we were holding classes in person at our office in Kearney Mesa, we would do them monthly on a different care-specific, care-related topic. This is our first time doing a skills clinic remotely, so I'm really excited about this one. I think it's a topic that is incredibly timely, and I'm really happy to be joined today by my co-presenter. We'll let Thomas introduce himself here in a moment. Just if anybody doesn't know me, I'm Amy Abrams. I'm the Director of Education with Alzheimer's San Diego, joined today by Thomas Shaw. So here is our agenda for today, what it is that we're planning to cover. We'll be talking about wait, Thomas, did I skip your, no, you're coming up. We'll be talking about the key benefits of physical activity for people who are living with dementia and their care partners. And when you get to meet my co-presenter, Thomas Shaw, in a moment here, he's going to tell you a little bit about himself. You will see why. I'm really excited to have him participating in this program. Lots of both academic, research-oriented expertise in this area, but also a great deal of personal experience in caring for somebody who's living with dementia and using movement and motion to support both of their quality of life. So we'll be talking about some practical strategies for incorporating more movement into everyday life, both for yourself as well as the person that you care for. And then we're going to talk, of course, about where and how to do this. Certainly, it needs to be acknowledged that the state of the world is different right now than it used to be, and our access to the places that we've always been able to go, the gyms, the activities that we've been able to participate in freely, or at least with more access, they're limited right now. There are some things that are different about how we have to do this today. We will certainly be addressing some of those differences and changes, and hopefully kind of connecting those dots for you as we go. So very happy to turn things over to Thomas Shaw. Let him tell you a little bit about himself.
All right, thanks, Amy, and good morning, and excuse me, good afternoon. I know there's at least one participant on the East Coast to everybody. Yeah, the slide there gives you all the pertinent details, but I'm going to go into two things specifically regarding this lesson. And one is, as Amy said, I am a care partner for my wife, Lynn, who was diagnosed with young onset Alzheimer's. I wrote the dates down just so I wouldn't get confused, in August of 2016. Actually, that was when she got her severe cognitive impairment diagnosis. So as is the case with young onset, the diagnosis tends to come pretty late. But that, coincidentally, the day she did her neuropsychological assessment was the same day I started my full-time master's degree program. So I wouldn't recommend it necessarily to anybody to start a full-time master's degree program and embark as a full-time Alzheimer's care partner. That was challenging. But when she got her diagnosis, well, she got her Alzheimer's diagnosis in November of that year, the day before Thanksgiving. And at that point, her neurologist said she was transitioning from early to mid stage. So I didn't get a lot of time to build up. So fast forward to present time, and she's been in a residential care facility for about the last 9 months, and she's transitioned, or is transitioning from mid to late stage. So it was a pretty quick transition. So I've pretty much seen everything there is to see, it seems like, as a care partner, from having her at home where she could spend some time alone, to having to bring caregivers in the house, to where she got to the point where I didn't think I could manage her care with the skills I had as a family caregiver. She started having hallucinations and paranoia, and that just got more challenging for me. Tough decision, and I also appear in the Confessions of a Caregiver series, so I can talk more about that in that series. That's a plug for Amy for that one. But it's been a challenge. But as Amy said, physical activity has been something that Lynn and I have enjoyed both doing on our own and together. We used to go hiking together, go on walks together, and separately. I've been involved in endurance sports for a while, and Lynn was a dancer, so it's been something that has really been part of our lives and continued through her journey. So she would walk with different caregivers, walk with All's Companions, and when she was able to go to day program at Jewish Family Service, there was dancing there, and even in memory care now, physical activity is still part of her life. So it's important to us, and I'll talk more about that, but I think it's really helped. So anyway, that's my story. Did I miss anything, Amy, that you wanted me to cover?
No, those are the pertinent details. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hand you the remote control now, so you've got it.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. I don't want to spend too much time on this slide, but the percentages in the middle, I think, will just show that, as if you didn't know this already, caregiving is hard. And it's not a surprise to anybody, but when I look at the statistics, it's interesting, because, as a group, the majority of us think we don't get enough exercise, we don't get enough sleep or quality sleep, we don't get breaks, and we don't get support. But I think physical activity can help in all of those areas, and we'll talk more about that. But this is kind of a spoiler alert for those of you who are thinking about memory care. As I found, I still don't get much of a break. It's different because I'm always waiting for the phone call to ring to talk to Lynn or something. So even with that, it's been still a caregiver, even though Lynn's in memory care. It's just a different part of being a caregiver, which was something I wasn't expecting, but it's got its pluses and minuses too. But always a caregiver, and that I think we all are familiar with that it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job, whether we're actively engaged in that or not. And I was captain of a ship, and I had to sleep, so I wasn't always on the bridge, but I would get calls in the middle of the night, so it's equated to that. So always on alert, always on watch. I'm trying to advance, Amy, but nothing's happening. Oh, okay, here we are.
Okay, so quickly, we'd love to hear from you, or I should say, we'd love to read from you a little bit about why you're here today. You don't have to answer all these questions, but if you're so inclined, please open up the Zoom webinar chat box and choose to send your message to all the panelists and attendees if you'd like for everyone to be able to see it. And tell us one of these things about yourself. What brought you to the webinar today? What questions do you have about exercise and physical activity, either for a person who's living with dementia, for yourself as a care partner? What challenges are you currently experiencing when it comes to maybe motivating somebody to get moving or finding fun and accessible activities? And do you have any activities that you are using today? Are you doing something that's working that you'd like to share with the rest of the group? Just take a quick moment and send us a quick chat. We'd love to just know who's here and get a sense of where you're at so that we can kind of tailor the rest of the presentation accordingly, what we focus on and what we don't. We'll give you a minute. You don't need to write us a long novel, but tell us a little bit about yourself. Oops. Sorry about that. There we go. I'm not seeing any. Here we go. Hey. Husband has dementia, having a hard time engaging him in activities. Preference is to sleep. I bet you're not alone in that. That's a very common symptom, changes in sleeping patterns. Husband has dementia and doesn't like to exercise. Yeah. For some folks, that's a lifelong preference. And then you layer on dementia, cognitive impairment, it becomes even more of a barrier. Oh, great. My mom has moved from memory care to a nursing home. I brought in Scrabble and she still loves it with dementia. Scrabble's a wonderful activity. Okay. The person that this care partner cares for used to love to walk but has no interest in anything physical anymore. How to stimulate interest again? Yeah, great. We will definitely be talking about initiating and overcoming that apathy. Yeah, just wondering if you're doing okay as a care partner. Probably a lot of people sharing that question and concern. Concerns about balance and stability. Yes, doing all of these things safely is very important. We certainly want to minimize risk. I'm a fitness professional with a father who has dementia, always looking for new ideas. Great, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. My partner passed in February. I continue these workshops in his memory. I want to be part of these groups. Wonderful. I happen to know this care partner, and I can tell you he's got great tips and advice to share. So certainly, please, you have our, we would love to hear from you, all of you, about anything that's really worked well in your caregiving journey. We'd love your contributions to this program as well. Great. Well, there may be some more coming in. We'll keep an eye on it. Thank you so much. I have someone who just finished a caregiving course. Oh, wonderful. Wanting to learn as much as I can before I start working with the goal of going into occupational therapy. Terrific. Great. We're always looking for ways to expand knowledge and awareness of the ins and outs of doing these activities with people with dementia specifically. So wonderful. Thank you for choosing that career and that line of work. That's great. Okay, well, thank you. Thomas, go ahead and click away. I think you're next. We'll keep an eye on the chat. Please continue to share there if you are so inclined. And don't forget, the Q&A is where you can submit questions if they come up for you as we go along.
All right, thanks, Amy. So next up on the agenda is to talk about the benefits of physical activity for those living with dementia and us as their care partners. So there's a lot of research in this area as far as how physical activity can help those with dementia. It was a surprisingly amount of research when I started looking at it. But you can read it, and it's symptom management. We all know there's no magic solution for any kind of dementia. So it's not going to reverse it. It can help slow it. And we've talked physical and cognitive decline. Actually, there's some proteins that get released in the brain that help the brain kind of repair itself. But again, it's not a panacea. It's not a magic pill. But I think, especially as I've seen Lynn get farther into it, and she's still relatively young. She's only 60. But I'm already noticing that kind of second bullet down where her motor function, her posture, and her balance has been affected. And we'll come back to that. But I think that's where I see for her, keeping her in good physical condition just helps her with some of those things. Because she has fallen, she bumps into things that she can't see, and just being physically fit has helped her with that. I think I'm going to use her as a lot of examples. I tend to do that. I always draw examples from my experience, even though everyone's is different, but I'm the most familiar with mine. So Lynn, I've noticed a reduction in the depressive symptoms, and sleep has been an issue for her. And I saw in one of the chats where initially she slept all the time, and then she got to where she didn't sleep. But I think, finding activities that she would want to participate in kind of helped her sleep. And then if a person can engage in physical activity in a social environment, and that may be really hard to do now, and I understand that, but that there's a benefit to that as well. And the good news is physical activity doesn't just help with dementia. It helps with a lot of other things. If a person has cardiovascular disease or high blood pressure or diabetes, it's not like taking a drug that only impacts one thing positively. It impacts a lot of things positively. And unlike drugs, there aren't any side effects as long as you do it correctly. So it benefits a whole bunch of different things. Okay, and for those of us as a care partner, good news is all those things that it does for our people, or it does for us too. So it's good for our health overall. And there's not a lot of research in this area, and this is where I was focusing before the pandemic kind of shut down my research. But the evidence that there is suggests that physical activity helps us as caregivers and really reducing the burden. And burden's kind of a loose term as it's defined in the academic literature, but that's one of the measures that tend to get. But subjectively, care partners who are able to engage in their own physical activity tend to report less burden, less stress, and somewhat less depression. So this is an area I got really excited about researching, and unfortunately I just had to do a little bit of a pause on it, but the initial research is really positive. And again, and I think, well, we get into this a little bit later, but I think for me, it's helped with some resiliency, just able to deal with things better, and help Lynn as she's needed more help with me actually helping to move her around. So again, there's all kinds of positive benefits to physical activity, and as long as it's done correctly, very few to no negative negative consequences. So yeah, these are, when Amy and I were putting this together, we made a list of things that I thought physical activity helped with me. And you can read those there, and you may be asking yourself, what does that odd looking ship have to do with any of this? But that was a ship I commanded when I was in the Navy. We had a unique special operations mission that was somewhat off the books, but it was hard. And I, as captain, suffered with, I didn't have good patience all the time. I didn't sleep. I didn't necessarily eat that well. But I needed to be resilient because I had, 100 plus people depending on me every day. So one of the things that we really worked on was our physical fitness, and it was hard to maintain that underway. But in port, we spent a lot of time on our physical fitness just to kind of build up a reserve, because I knew it was going to decrease when we got underway. And I think that helped the whole crew. So especially with the resiliency, we had a more of a reserve to draw from, and that helped. And I think that directly correlates to us as care partners. So for when we can find the time to do physical activity, then it helps us with what we're doing. And I acknowledge that my experience as a family caregiver with my care person at home is different than yours right now, because I did not have to do this when I didn't have access to caregivers and to day programs and things like that. So I recognize your challenge is not the same challenge that I had, and it's probably more difficult, but that doesn't negate the fact that I think physical activity can still help. But I just want to acknowledge that you're doing something that I didn't have to do. So, and I appreciate what you're going through. Okay, so you may be wondering, or oops, I got ahead too far. Let's just, we'll come back to that one. So physical activity is great. How much of it do you need? And it's only 22 minutes a day, which is not very much. This is statistics come from the National Institute of Health. And you can read, it's 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity activity. And that's anything you can do while being able to maintain a conversation. And you see that graphic going, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we're talking physical activity here and not necessarily exercise. So if you can spread 22 minutes throughout the day and do that 7 days a week, then you've met your goal of 150 minutes. Or if you're able to do more vigorous, then basically it doubles it. So if you do maybe a run, if you're able to get out and run on your own where you have trouble, you couldn't maintain a conversation, that kind of doubles it. So you only need 75 minutes of those. And it's actually okay if you maybe have 1 day a week when you can do more. So I would call it weekend warrior, but I know from my experience, the weekends were the hardest part for me as a caregiver. But if there is a day where you have some help and you're able to get an hour or more, then that all counts. And don't worry about having 1 day that's more than the other, as long as you get it done. And the muscle strengthening, a couple days a week, and it's not on here, but there's also some balance exercises, which tend to get more challenging as people lose their balance. But if your person is able to do like stand on one foot kind of things, or maybe support over the chair, that helps as well. Because again, that's what I've been really surprised with Lynn, as relatively young as she is, where how much her balance is off at this point. That surprised me. Was not expecting that much of a decline at her relatively young age, but just goes to show what the disease can do. So on that loop, you'll see different things. Garden. We'll talk more about this, but it's not. Well, let me go to the next slide because this is literally what I want to talk about. So when we talk physical activity, we're not necessarily talking about exercise. And if you'll allow me to read a couple of definitions to you, I will do that. First one is physical activity, which is any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles that requires energy expenditure. That covers a lot of ground. So that's where you saw on the previous slide, the gardening, the house cleaning, walking, playing with pets, playing with kids, all that counts as physical activity, and all of that counts toward the 150 minutes a week, as long as it requires energy expenditure. Exercise is a physical activities that is planned, structured, and repetitive for the purpose of conditioning any part of the body. So exercise is physical activity, but physical activity doesn't necessarily mean exercise. So again, the point of us talking today is not to necessarily get people to exercise more, it's to be more physically active. And it's not all those things that I talked about earlier, that it was physical activity that produced those benefits, not necessarily exercise. So that I think that's a key point to look at. That, we're not telling people to go to a gym, which they can do right now, or go for a run, or go buy the latest, greatest fitness machine and put it in their house. It's just about being more physically active.
Thomas?
Yes.
Can I just pipe up? We've had a question here. Will you be addressing a little bit further on some of the actual kind of specific physical activities that families can do, care partners and their people living with the diagnosis of dementia, that they can do together?
Yes, we will. And we'll talk about that. And as I found in doing these kind of presentations, or I always learn things. So there's probably people that are part of this webinar that have those ideas too. So we'll talk about that. And that's a great question. And
terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome. Amy put this in for me. I think this slide in particular, because she knows I like to read. You're going to learn a lot about me today. I like to read Greco-Roman philosophers, just because I found it some helpful for me in my journey. Some of the things they talked about with resiliency and how to deal with problems. But the point of the quote here is that this is not a competition, and where the only standard you need to judge yourself against is yourself. So Amy and I talk about running. Her short runs are the same length as my long runs, but it's not a competition. It's just but I think it's to look for continual improvement within yourself and whatever goals you set. If it's a goal to be able to lift up your partner if he or she falls, or to maybe be able to handle the situation without getting angry. Those are the kind of goals I think to look for, but not comparing yourself to somebody else who is able to get out and run or do whatever it is. So it's and I have to notice with Lynn, because she would turn things. She was very competitive, and I was a competitive athlete for a little while, so I have to remind myself of this. But Lynn would always want to compete with me, how fast she could walk and all these other things. And I learned just to let her win. So for her, it was a competition, but she always won. But again, the standard you're comparing yourself to in this, there's the trying to meet the 150 minutes a week, but it's you and seeing gains in yourself or whatever goals you set for yourself. And we'll talk more about that, but it's really not comparing yourself to anybody else but yourself. I think the next slide is yours, actually, Amy.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Thomas. So, yeah, I think your observation about what you experienced with your wife's changing balance is really a really important observation. And I know that it goes without saying, but we often just need reminders. Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia, these are neurodegenerative diseases of the brain. Right? Brain cells are being affected, and eventually brain cells are dying as a result of the pathology, whatever type of dementia the person is impacted by. Some people phrase this as the brain itself is actually dying, right? Regions of it are being affected. So it's absolutely unavoidable that as the disease moves into different regions of the brain, in particular to regions up in the parietal lobes, up at the kind of crown of the head and back toward the rear regions of the brain, our occipital lobes and our cerebellum, we start to see those physical changes and changes in a person's visual spatial abilities. They are unfortunately an inevitable part of this disease for most people. So I just wanted to sort of take a quick break and just explain and kind of normalize that for you. If anybody has seen these physical changes, in addition to memory and thinking changes and personality changes, they are difficult, they're challenging, but they are an expected part of this disease process, right? So we're all pretty familiar with memory and cognitive changes that are associated with Alzheimer's and other types of dementia. And specifically, having a hard time paying attention, focusing your concentration on something for more than a few seconds or a few minutes, that will affect a person's ability to engage in sort of that purposeful exercise that Thomas is talking about, as well as difficulty with sequencing. A person may have really enjoyed riding a bicycle most of their life. And as the disease progresses, it can just get harder for the brain to put the sequences in process, right? In what order do I need to do these things? So tasks that involve multiple parts of the body like that, as well as paying attention to traffic and street signs and your safety on the bicycle, those types of tasks can get very difficult, even very early on in the disease process for folks. Again, as disease kind of moves up into parietal regions of the brain, we are very likely to see changes in a person's physical movement. So the visual field tends to narrow significantly for people with dementia, so that the field of peripheral vision is getting narrower and narrower. Even pretty early on in the disease process, we will see that in many forms of dementia. So as a result of that, people struggle with being able to see what's going on in their periphery, or even just kind of take in the social context of everything that's happening in a room, because they can really only see and focus and pay attention on a small part of it. That makes it harder to engage in a lot of kind of the social types of physical activities that we're used to engaging in. And as Thomas noted, difficulties with balance and gait. And actually, one or two of you, our participants in your introductions, shared concerns about being able to participate safely in physical activities because of those changes to a person's, their center of gravity changes. But also, if any one of us were walking around in a scuba mask, for example, that limited our field of vision, it most definitely changes your ability to navigate rocky sidewalks, for example, or steps, right? It definitely impacts balance and gait. And then, of course, the behavior changes that are part and parcel of these diseases, they cause difficulty with participating in physically active activities. People do frequently withdraw. They become apathetic. I saw a lot of that in your descriptions of what's going on with the folks that you're caring for right now. Simple refusal, well, simple is not the right word for that, but just straight out refusal to participate, saying no, being resistant, or just general, no, I don't feel like it today, right? All of those behaviors, we just sort of lump that into the category of resistance generally, but all of those different behaviors, these are all barriers to being able to get your person to participate the way that we want them to. So we're going to talk about strategies for resistance in a little bit. I want to make a plug, though. We do have an entire education program dedicated to that topic because it's a big one. For now, though, when it comes to integrating more physical activity or exercise if you can, but just generally more movement and motion into the person's life or into your own life, what we want you to focus on is not all that stuff that I just talked about, right? All of the things that are failing in that person's brain, all of the functions that they're losing, it's very easy, very natural, very normal to focus on those things. But what we want you to be paying attention to and kind of trying to tap into are what strengths, what abilities still remain for that person. What have they always been pretty good at, right? In terms of activities that, and I don't mean what could they beat Thomas at in a competition, but like, what have they really enjoyed? What has really fulfilled them? What have been their personal strengths when it comes to movement? Were they really great in the garden, or they really had a green thumb, or they really enjoyed music? And so maybe integrating some music or other of their unique interests into physical activity. We were having a conversation as a staff yesterday, myself and my teammates at Alzheimer's San Diego, about music that motivates us and stimulates us and picks us up on a difficult day. And I shared with my teammates that anything from The Sound of Music, that movie, that will always pick me up and motivate me, right? So that would be one of my unique interests, right? A lifelong thing that's always kind of worked for me as a pick-me-up. That would be something that my care partner could tap into someday if they needed to. So I encourage you to think about those things about the person you care for. What are they interested in? What do they respond to? If you haven't tried it in a while, right? Don't make assumptions about what they would or would not respond to. You never know. And certainly new preferences can come up as well. The person really like to be warm. If somebody kind of cold-blooded, they run very cold, you might be less effective at getting them to get outside for a walk if they're concerned about being chilly out there, right? They may or may not be able to tell you that, but if you know that about them, boy, if we really bundle up and we get them cozied up in their favorite sweater, then I might be more inclined. This is what I mean by focusing on what they're good at and what their abilities are. One thing that sort of one of the difficult realities, I think, of dementia caregiving is all of this work and effort that you may be putting into developing activities, creating these memories. I think as care partners, we're trying to do things that are really going to inspire the person, and it kind of feels like failure if tomorrow or an hour from now they don't even remember that we did it. Right? It can feel very frustrating. So I encourage you to kind of reframe your thinking and think about, when you're thinking about physical activities and movement together, focus on creating that particular moment with them. Thomas talked about the physiological effects of exercise, right? Improving a person's sleep. There's lots of lingering positive effects from physical activity. Whether the person remembers having been outside in the sunshine moving around for a few minutes or not, their body remembers it, right? So they will feel those physical benefits for some time. So pay attention to the moment that you're experiencing right now, and let go of the aim, the goal of creating memories with that person. You can be the keeper of those memories, right? Just give them the moments. So I'd like to pause briefly here and see, we have had some questions come in that we've answered as we've gone along. Are there any questions about the benefits of physical activity before we move into the strategies, the ideas? Jean, have any other questions?
Actually, Amy, can I back up to that last slide? I wanted to add a couple of things to that as a question. It's kind of two sides of the same coin. As I found with Lynn, I needed to be cognizant of what she actually could do based on what she thought she could do. She, or times, as it went along, where she still thought that she could, walk 3 or 4 miles, where maybe, cardiovascularly she could, but she didn't have the coordination to be able to do that, and that got hard. So if we went on walks, I'd have to, just be sensitive to that and try to steer her home, or I'd tell her we were on a 6-mile walk when it was only a 1-mile walk, just to be in her moment. And I think
Great.
Two, it was, and you mentioned this, but it was a matter of me you know, not willingly to do something because that's what we used to be able to do together, was finding new things we could do together, whatever that was. So, you know, the driving a long way to go for a hike up a mountain, you know, it was one of the things we really enjoyed doing, but, you know, it got to the point where, you know, she didn't like sitting in a car, or we'd get there and it was, she didn't want to be outside because it was too hot or too cold. So I had to kind of adapt. You know, it was one about me at this point, it's about her. So I couldn't will something on her that I wanted her to do based on what we used to be able to do. And I really think it's the moment. Whatever she presented in that moment is what we did. And if some days that may be nothing, and that, I think that's okay, because it wasn't worth pushing it just to make me feel better, to make her feel bad.
Thank you. That is such an important point. It can be really hard to separate ourselves and our expectations of what this person used to be able to do, our memories of what we used, you know, the activities we used to engage in together. It does color your expectations and also your interpretation of what's going on, right? That a 10-minute walk may not feel satisfying to you when you used to go on day-long hikes together. But really learning to be in that moment with that person can shift that thinking. Thank you. It's really relevant. Jean, anything before we?
It's kind of the flip side of what you've just talked about, Amy, in that one of the questions that came up is, you know, a dad that's a care partner to a mom who's, you know, sounds like she's just got generalized weakness, poor balance. She needs help even just walking short distances. But dad himself has some physical limitations. He's got a bad back. He's got arthritis. So in this instance, you know, what dad is able to do needs to be considered in order for him to best help mom and not injure himself.
Yes. I think back to Thomas's big news flash at the beginning. Caregiving is hard, right? Yeah. Caregiving is physically difficult. And doing all of these things may be more physically demanding than the care partner can tolerate. So we will be talking about, you got to have a team. One person cannot be responsible for the person with dementia, you know, every aspect of their well-being. So bringing in other members of your support system or building new parts of your support system when doing the walking, doing the chair yoga together is not going to work for the care partner. There will be those times. You just can't be doing it alone. Thank you. Yeah, you gotta recognize the limitations. Caregiving is a marathon, as they say, right? It's not a sprint, and we really need for care partners to be managing their pace too.
Amy, I read that one of the questions in the chat, and I think you might have another skills clinic that actually talks about how to move people like up and down out of a bathtub and transition them. Are you still? I kind of putting you on the spot here.
Yeah.
Something it may be harder to do virtually than it was.
Right. We haven't yet figured out how to adapt the skills clinics fully into the online environment. But yeah, we're kind of working on that, since Jean and we can't be in the same room together to do demonstrations with each other. We're maybe we'll get some dummies or show some videos or do some things, but we haven't yet figured that out.
Yeah.
But yes, that's information and education is available. If not through us, we can connect you to other resources for it.
And I think too, kind of addressing that chat where, you know, for me, it wasn't with Lynn so much, I couldn't do it physically and I had to ask for help. It was more, I got to the point where, you know, me emotionally and my own well-being, I needed it to ask for help. I had -1, I had all the symptoms of caregiver burnout, and I knew I just to the point where I was hurting myself. So in the case of, you know, the 73-year-old man who physically can't care for his wife, and you know that may be the warning sign that some other solution needs to be looked at for helping him before he hurts himself. So
that's right.
And I know that's hard. I mean, we're all proud people, and I think as caregivers, we like to say we got this, we can do this, but the key is before we get to a breaking point is to put things in place. And I was really glad I had people in my life who saw what was happening to me and kind of did, kind of intervention saying you need to get some help. It was still hard, but that just was my shout out to everybody that we're not in this alone. And there may be resources out there or solutions that you haven't even thought of that maybe somebody else can help you with. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yes, thank you. So, very relevant. Okay, Thomas, I think this is you, yeah?
Sorry, I keep muting and unmuting myself. So, yeah, health behavior change is really, really hard. And it's harder when the person has dementia. So that first bullet in that slide, I think, is a big one. It's emotions drive behavior more than knowledge or facts. And I don't think that probably very few people would make an argument that physical activity is not good for a person. Yet as a society, only around 23% of Americans meet the minimum standards for physical activity. So before COVID, I thought it was one of our nation's biggest public health problems was just the lack of physical activity. But you're all here because you've already reached the point where maybe you realize that you need more physical activity, which is great. But the next couple of bullets, I think, are ways to make that, or what the research would suggest, help make that behavior change. And the first one needs to be fun, and then it's better when we're in groups. And I got a couple examples of that. One is, for me, I tried to be a triathlete for a little while, but I hate swimming. There's nothing I like about it. Intellectually, I know it's a great exercise. I know it's a full body exercise. Cardiovascularly, it's one of the best exercises you can do. But I hate everything about swimming. I hate going to the pool. I don't like the way pools smell. I don't like the way there's nothing I like about swimming. So there's nothing I'm going to do to swim. So I don't do it, but I know it's great for me. I still don't do it. But there's other things I like to do that maybe are not as good for me, but I like them better and I do them. So intellectually, yeah, I know swimming's great, but I won't do it. But I think too, in setting goals, the goal may not be to walk 10,000 steps or to run a 5K run or whatever it is that lift so many weights in the gym or garden for whatever goal you're setting. There may be other ways to look at this, and I'll use two examples. Part of my master's degree program was doing some health coaching, and I had a couple of really good clients who I thought made some interesting goals for themselves, and one was a woman who wanted to lose some weight and get in better shape, and helped her in setting goals. And it was she wanted to be in better shape for her kids and be there for her kids, which I thought was good. It wasn't all related really to her, so many pounds of weight she wanted to lose or dress size, whatever. It was just she wanted to be there for her kids, which I thought was completely applicable to us in wanting to be in shape to be there for the people we're caring for. And then was another partner who's in the group today watching, client who liked to walk, but didn't like to just go out and walk and then come back. So turn walks into another activity of identifying plants or birds or things like that. So if the idea of going for a walk just doesn't sound like a good idea because it's boring, then add something into it. And I think that can be helpful. And this is something that Lynn and I would do to get her to walk when sometimes she didn't want to go. Was just she loved birds, so let's go. They're not too far from where we live. There are a lot of birds, so just go walk down and look at the birds and look at the plants along the way. And just something. I get it. Just going outside to go for a walk and coming back may not be exciting, but to combine it with something that your person liked to do could be helpful. So, and then it's in groups. I think that's so challenging now is to the group aspect of it. But assuming we get to the point where we can work out or be in groups again, all the benefits of physical activity are improved when there's a group, and the research says it calls it a socialization effect. It improves, it compounds the benefits of exercise. And again, I acknowledge that that's hard now, and I acknowledge that you're doing something I'm not having to do. But if there's a way with a family or with other people you can bring in to do it in a group, that's extremely helpful.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk for a little bit about some techniques that you can employ. And I really appreciate your comments on walking becoming actually going out and looking at the birds, right? Your language can make a lot of difference. The way you think about physical activity is the place to start, but the way you talk about it can be very different too. I think a lot of us just say, we need to get moving, you need some exercise, right? That makes going outside for a walk automatically sound like, 10 times less fun, 1/10 of the fun, I should say, right? Rather than, gosh, it's a beautiful day, the birds are chirping, let's go see what they're up to, right? So we'll focus first on walking because, not for everybody, but for many people, this is a very sort of normal, natural movement we're all making every day anyway. And for a lot of care partners, just getting the person walking around the house or walking around the neighborhood or taking a drive somewhere and getting out for a walk is one of the simplest types of movement. So some things to be thinking about when it comes to walking. First, finding safe and accessible places to go, right? Depending upon where you live, you may or may not have safe sidewalks, good lighting, depending on what time of day you're going. Just sort of safe neighborhoods definitely matter. So we'll share with you on the next slide some resources for finding locations if you're not familiar with them. But certainly keep that in mind, right? All of these, think about those visual spatial limitations and balance problems that I was talking about. If you've got all of these additional layers of barrier for them and for you as the care partner, keeping them safe, you're both going to be less inclined to just get out there and do it. There are ways, walking is a very natural movement for most people, but there are ways, resources out there for learning like breathing techniques, movement techniques, and staying safe. We really encourage you, if somebody is struggling with walking and balance, talk with the doctor about that. It is not, even though balance changes are a part of dementia, they are to be expected and they're likely to progress over time. A person with dementia can still benefit from exercise and balance training, right? That improves the strength of their trunk, their core, their glutes, those big muscles in your butt that help you move around. Certainly talk with your doctor about whether or not, strengthening exercises, PT, those types of things might help. Again, it's the progressive change in the brain is definitely inevitable, but the person can still benefit from staying as strong and as active as possible. Be in comfortable clothing and have good sturdy footwear. There's lots of inexpensive resources out there for finding stable footwear. Clothing, that can mean any number of things, right? You want to make it comfortable and breathable, but again, if this is a person who chills easily, you conversely might want to keep them adequately bundled up and think about sun protection, right? All of those things. Just being mindful of your breathing and their breathing. If somebody is struggling with breathing, in particular right now when we are all supposed to be wearing our face coverings when we're out of the house, just be mindful of that, right? Do stop when you need to, slow down, take pauses when you need to, and focus on good stomach breathing, right? Not getting too constricted in your chest. So just want to say a quick note on sort of social distancing requirements and masks and all of that right now. Some people may have questions about that. It is not currently a requirement in San Diego County that a person wear a facial covering when they're outside exercising, as long as you're staying 6 feet or more from other people. So that's currently the guidance. It's a personal decision about whether or not when I run, I wear a face covering, because I sometimes can't avoid getting closer than 6 feet to people. But keep that in mind. If you're in a safe and accessible place where you've got plenty of room to move around, you may not need to be in masks right now or face coverings. So that can be a nice excuse to get out there. Good, we can tear these things off if we get out into the park. We can meet these social distancing requirements. So I see that some suggestions are coming in. Oh, Thomas, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just two things on that slide. I think you
Sure.
talked about footwear to include socks. The right socks, I think, are important in addition to the right shoes. And I wanted to read an academic quote about walking. This is from the American College of Sports Medicine in physical exercise management for persons with chronic diseases and disabilities. And they say that walking should be the default form of physical activity for anyone who can walk. And I thought this was interesting because we don't really talk about this much, but pushing oneself in a wheelchair should be the default for those who use a wheelchair. So that's something I definitely see. I didn't have much exposure to that before Lynn went in memory care, but I certainly am more familiar with it now, where she's one of the few people that's not in a wheelchair, but the strength that they need just to push themselves around without having somebody needing to do that. And something I failed to mention when we were talking about the NIH guidelines for the amount of activity, and the guidelines are the same for our people as they are for us. So for the person with dementia, they should still be trying to get the 150 minutes of moderate physical activity. So the guidelines are the same.
Thank you. We will talk too about, we're not assuming everybody can and will walk. We're just starting with walking as an initial activity. Thank you. Yeah, the default activity for sure, whenever possible. So I see that in the chat, there's some folks sharing some suggestions. Please keep those coming. I love to see that. So here we have a couple of our suggestions for places you can go to identify safe walking routes, right? I know senior centers, libraries, and the YMCAs are not fully open just yet, but many of them still have staff available by phone who can talk to you about local walking routes if you're not familiar. I do know that the YMCAs are slowly opening back up as we speak. So check with your individual YMCA or senior center to see what's currently going on. There are some mall walking programs. Again, this is one of those suggestions that is for in the day and hopefully not too distant future, that these types of when we can get back inside malls and walk around them for social activity. But there are 3 very well established long-term mall walking programs here in San Diego County and Grossmont, down in Bonita and out in Otay Ranch. And of course you can just walk around a mall on your own too. Certainly get in touch with your local Parks and Rec department if you're in the city of San Diego, or if you're outside of the city. The county Parks and Recreation Department has a lot of great information on their websites, and including routes and information about safety and accessibility. Circulate San Diego is a really neat local organization that's all about mobility advocacy. So I provided their website for you here because they're probably not as well known to most of you. But if you find that your efforts are being thwarted by unsafe sidewalks or dangerous roads, this is a group that's got lots of information. They actually have a really great resources page on their website with safe biking and walking routes, but they also advocate for good mobility around San Diego County. And then of course, if you're into social media, you can communicate with folks on Nextdoor, find groups on Meetup, right? Those types of resources for finding people to walk with if you need it, or just good suggestions on places to go. Yes, Roadrunner Sports is a place. I see that there was a suggestion in the chat about getting the gait analysis. They're not just for like hardcore runners and speed walkers. Anybody can go to Roadrunner Sports and get an analysis. And I think the story that you shared in the chat is really important. So many people wear the wrong size shoe. So if it's too big, it's going to rub. Of course, if it's too small, it's going to hurt and you're going to hurt your toenails. So absolutely go to a running store or any of the sort of walking specialty stores. We've listed a couple here, but any of those places can do a good kind of analysis of your foot and your gait and make some good recommendations. And yes, having socks that fit, it's like so common sense, but it's a really good point. If it's bunching up, if it's too big, if it's slipping down, that bugs any of us, but it's certainly going to really bother a person who's living with dementia, who might, already be struggling with balance. If that sock is bunching up down there or slipping under my heel, it'll drive you crazy. And they may or may not be able to tell you, my sock is falling, can you help me with that? So these little things could be causing a great deal of resistance. Thanks for saying that. So, but there are other ways to be moving aside from walking around, right? When you are moving, when you are seated, either in a chair, on a couch, if a person uses a wheelchair, or if they use a walker and they have a seat in it, those are all opportunities for engaging in seated movements, doing stretching together, or following along with someone else who is doing that. Of course, dancing is just one of the best types of physical activity overall, because it incorporates so many different regions of your brain to listen to music and to move along with it, to respond to rhythm. And it also, for a lot of people, dancing involves another person. So you're making eye contact, you're getting social activity at the same time. And of course, you're getting the cardiovascular benefits of that too. So lots of ways that you can do this. You as the care partner do not have to be the initiator of all of these things. There is a huge variety of television programs, streaming video. On the next slide, I'm going to show you some resources for this. One of our favorite new things that we've been seeing people do during the pandemic, one of the wonderful innovations that people figure out on their own is using FaceTime, Zoom, other video conferencing technology with a companion who's remote from you and engaging in physical activity together, right? We can both see each other, I can do some movements, and you can follow along with me. It's really been lovely, and Adriana, my colleague, is going to come on in a little bit and tell you about one of our free programs that makes that possible for local families. But this can be anybody, right? This can be a child, a grandchild, a niece, nephew, a neighbor, somebody that they know, or even somebody that they don't know, right? Who can engage with them remotely to get moving. And then keep in mind, I did see in the chat as you were introducing yourselves, that there are people with physical limitations who are not going to be able to engage in what's called active movement, right? When I lift my arms, I'm making an active movement. I'm choosing to do that. My brain is sending the signals to my limbs and making that movement happen. Sometimes what we need to do because of a person's changing abilities or permanent disability is engage in what's called passive movement, right? Where somebody else might pick up my arm and help me move it up, right? I'm still getting the benefit in my shoulder joints, right? All those muscles are getting that movement, even if somebody else, I'm being more passive in the movement, I'm still getting some physical benefit from doing that. So some resources for doing that. Yeah, I see YouTube does have amazing classes. YouTube can be a little overwhelming. There's a lot there, but absolutely, it's kind of a wonderful rabbit hole. If you go onto YouTube and just sort of plug in or type in senior exercises or chair exercises, you will see an incredible variety of streaming and recorded video that for just this purpose, and it's all free. So if you're not already familiar with the Feeling Fit Club, this is a terrific local resource that we have here in San Diego County. But of course, if you're outside of San Diego County, I guess nobody would really know if you're logging on and participating in these programs. But through their website, healthierlivingsd.org, that website will take you to what's called the Feeling Fit Club. So when senior centers are back open, you will find they do in-person fitness programming at physical locations, but in the meantime, they do offer free functional fitness programming that is televised. The different cable channels and the days and times that those programs air are all listed on that website, because of course it depends on your particular cable provider. But you could also just stream these things online if you have access to, if the person has access to the internet at countynewscenter.com. All of this, just go to healthierlivingsd.org and you'll find information about all these things on that website. They also have a physical DVD they can send you that shows videos of the Feeling Fit Club activities. So these are functional fitness programs designed for older adults and people with disabilities. So they're easy to follow along with, and they're easily modifiable. So for a lot of care partners, this really can be so helpful to just sort of get yourself off the hook, right? Put something on the computer, put something on the TV, fire up your tablet or your mobile phone and get somebody else engaging your person in some physical activity. Gives you a break from having to be the initiator of these tasks always, but also they have different ideas. They have different strategies that can be helpful. One person in particular who has an amazing array of ideas and strategies and ways to motivate people is this woman that you see on these slides. This is Danny. She is what is her actual title? She's a fitness expert. She has a business called Energy Body Works, which you see there. And she works with us at Alzheimer San Diego to facilitate our movement and motion program, the program for which this class was named. And she leads people in group activities. We used to do these in our office twice a month, of course. We can't do that at the moment, but she does do them live now she does them live for us a couple times a month, and she also has recordings, which you can watch through the activities page of our website, alzsd.org. Thomas, since you and Lynn used to participate in movement and motion, is there anything you can add about that experience as a care partner?
Yeah, it was great, because one of the things that Danny incorporates in her programs is music, and you mentioned it before, but it's amazing to me the effect that music has on Lynn and what I see in the other residents of her facility. It wakes up something that has been dormant for a while, and I think combining the music with the exercises as Danny does, and she does the movements to music, which is just, and I think that's extremely helpful. Anecdotally I see that, but I'm sure the research would back that up too, just the effect that music has. And
Yes.
Danny's energy is amazing. I've watched her videos. It's too bad she can't do it live, but
well, she can actually. And Adriana, if those of you that have your chat open, you'll see she's actually doing a live class for us tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Thank you, Adriana, for pointing that out to me. I did know that and I forgot. It's a Zoom class, and you can participate with anybody, can just log in and participate with her live. She is, as Thomas noted, she's a real bundle of positive energy. She's very motivating. Yeah, but there are also recordings. We have a full online exercise library of short recordings that Danny has made for us. Yeah, very cool. Okay, so, and then of course there's all of these other ways that we can get people engaged in physical activity that have nothing to do with exercise, as Thomas noted. I think one of the most important things to think about is doing purposeful things, right? What is something that's really going to feed this individual person's interest, give them a sense of purpose that they are contributing something either to you, to another person, to their household, or to their community at large. And there's lots of different ways that we can get people engaging in purposeful activity, right? Just helping me with some dishes, folding the laundry and putting things away, right? Even if those things don't actually need to be done, engaging in those tasks that get a person using their arms to fold, walking around the house to put something away. There are some very simple ways we can just get physical activity sort of ratcheted up during the course of the day. Of course, gardening, yard work, pulling weeds, lots of ways to engage in physical movement outside. And it might be, if you're finding somebody that is just totally unmotivated to get up and get outside to go for a walk or to get some exercise, right? Ooh, the yard is a mess. Let's go pull weeds for a minute, right? Or let's go smell the flowers. They are blooming beautifully right now, right? Ambling around the garden can be your version of a walk for that day. Doing errands, of course, just getting out. If all else fails, let's go to lunch, right? There's movement involved in getting in and out of the car, and getting your errands done and going on outings together. Somebody mentioned Scrabble, right? Often there are ways you can incorporate physical movement into game playing too, right? So move the game into I've got the puzzle set up in the next room. Instead of bringing the puzzle or the board game to them, get it all set up in the next room or outside on a table outside, for example, and get them moving as a part of engaging in that activity. And then finally, two of the most effective strategies for all of us for incorporating more movement into our life is children and animals, right? They are energetic. In order to keep up with them, you have to kind of move around and play along. So if you have young children in your family or in the neighborhood that you can bring in to be a part of the team here, if there is a pet that the person enjoys, certainly dog walking, taking care of the cats, right? Chasing them around the house, throwing balls and yarn and things for animals to play with. That's movement, and it's engaging, and it can really be a gateway to building more activity into your day-to-day.
Amy, one point I want to
Sure.
add to that, just as an example, was the housework part of it. Because Lynn wanted to, I just saw when the chats come up, I'm hitting the balloon. Yeah, balloon volleyball is a fantastic activity. But for Lynn, she still wanted to do things to make a contribution. It got easy for me just to do everything just because it was harder to do with her. But one of the things we did together was vacuum. And I would run the vacuum, and then she would keep constant tension on the cord, so I never had to worry about moving it out of the way or anything else. And so we were doing something together. We were both engaged in physical activity, and now that she's in memory care, I miss her anyway, but on the vacuum day, I miss her keeping tension on the cord because now I have to do that myself. But it was something we could do together. And everybody needs a sense of purpose, and that gave her a sense of purpose. Yes, I'm cleaning the house. So I'm not even sure how we figured that out. I think she just wanted to help me vacuum. And how do you help somebody vacuum? Like, all right, well, make sure the cord doesn't get in the way. And she did that. And then she'd help me sweeping and hold the dustpan, just things like that, where she kind of checked the block for physical activity, as well as giving her a sense of purpose and something we could do together.
Great. That's a really nice example too of focusing on a person's remaining strengths and abilities, right? That yes, being able to get out for those long hikes or bike rides or things that we used to be able to do together may be more difficult or impossible now, but what are some ways that this individual, what are their contributions that are yet to be made, and supporting me as we're doing housework together? That's a wonderful example. I'm sure she felt how needed she was, right? How helpful she was being to you in those moments.
Yeah, she did. She didn't like me doing everything, so she could contribute, and it gave her that sense of purpose that everybody needs.
Yes, yes.
Amy, I have a question for both
Sure.
you and Thomas. So, for the things that when the dementia has progressed to the point that the kinds of exercises and activities that they used to enjoy are becoming unsafe for a person to do so, what are your suggestions in terms of redirecting them or making that activity safer, or just kind of changing things up to be able to capture their desire to continue being active, but making sure it's in a safe manner. And specifically, we're talking about a gentleman who really enjoyed bicycling, and it became unsafe with progression of the disease.
Right. Well, it's a very, of course, a very individual answer, what's going to be effective for any one person. But I think I would start by encouraging the care partner to, again, try to come at this from a positive perspective. If a person, as Thomas was describing, Lynn wasn't aware of that things were changing with her, and she felt like she still had the energy, the strength, the endurance to do things the way that she used to do them. That's very common in people with dementia. So I'd say, first of all, just don't fight with that, right? If the person believes that they've got the capacity to do something, let them believe that they've got the capacity to do that thing. I'm not suggesting that you let them do that thing, but that you let them believe this is something I'm still capable of, right? This sense of our own power and our own ability is really important to all of us, including people with dementia. So I would resist the impulse to correct somebody and say, I know you love riding your bike, but that's not safe for you to do anymore, right? Instead, we want to propose an alternative, right? Give a substitute for that activity rather than saying, no, this is not something that we can do. So kind of saying the yes instead of the no. So I'd start there. And I mean, with the example of bicycle riding, there's lots of, what is the reason that it's no longer safe? Is it a matter of getting lost? Is it a matter of the physical balance that's required? You'd have to we can talk with you about what those individual sort of barriers are for that person. But think about what could be modified. Could this be, could you, I'm trying to think of a substitute for that. Are there other forms of locomotion that sort of recreate that feeling of, wind in your face, that would give the person that sense of that freedom? Could you go to a gym and engage in stationary bicycling? Even if if the person's still pretty early, could they maybe move to recumbent bicycling, which requires a little less of that balance and coordination? I think there's many possibilities. But be aware that bicycling itself as an activity may not be a modifiable thing. You may need to recreate the other joys and pleasures that the person gets from that activity with other things, providing a substitute.
Great.
Thomas, would you add anything there?
No, I thought that was good, Amy. And as Lynn progressed, one of the things I started to do there was just tell her that she did it and she had a good time doing it. So, which helped.
Yeah.
And not necessarily with physical activity, but it was with preparing meals or something. So I kind of had to. And I think you've heard me tell the story before, but I would prepare the meal and then tell her that she helped me, and then that made her feel fine. And then it never came up again. So it's kind of like you said, is don't say something that you can't do, because that always led to an argument. But I found, and it worked better the later she got in her disease progression, just telling her, oh, you did a great job, thanks for your help. And she felt great about it, and then we never talked about it again. So
Great.
I don't know if that would work necessarily with the cycling example. I know that's a tough one, but I think you gave some good alternatives. And with Lynn, she started to notice too on her own that some things were just too dangerous for her to do. She didn't feel comfortable doing them. I don't know if that's common with everybody, but she just realized that she had a level of unease in doing things and didn't want to do them anymore. So I was always grateful for those kind of things where I didn't have to tell her or try to. She just said, no, I don't feel comfortable doing this anymore.
It's a hard line for a care partner to navigate, right? How if somebody's beginning to feel unease with walking or bicycling, how hard should you push? Right? I think finding those alternatives that meet the the physical and emotional need of the prior activity is generally a safe answer.
Yeah, what is a person trying to get from the activity? I think that's, and can you recreate that? Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. I see some great suggestions coming in on the chat. Please keep those coming. We'll keep moving, but we'd love to hear from you other suggestions that you have for physical activity, or if this has inspired an idea for you, something you're going to try, please feel free to share that with us. I love this idea of drawing the alphabet with each foot or the ankle for lower leg strength and balance training. Keep the legs still and draw letters through foot and ankle movement. What a fun idea. That's a really good one. And thank you for this suggestion. There are the foot pedals that you can get relatively inexpensive that just sit on the ground in front of a chair that can recreate that motion of cycling, and they can actually be put on tables and used for hand and arm movement too. Yeah, great. Please keep those suggestions and ideas coming. I've actually been talking about managing resistance all along, so I'll move through this pretty quickly to make sure we've covered everything. But this is, for many of you, probably your greatest obstacle, not so much the person's physical balance challenges, but just the mental, the brick wall that you are finding yourself up against. So again, I encourage you to not focus on what the person can't do anymore, but to use action-oriented language and movements, right? If they're fighting with you over whether or not we're going to do this thing or whether or not I can do this thing, I can go out for a walk by myself. I don't need you to be with me, right? You might know that that's not safe and that that's not true. That's just not always something that needs to be said out loud. Talk about what the person can do. Let's get going, right? Just say, instead of getting into negotiations about whether or not we're going to get up and get moving, just use action-oriented language and movements. Just get the task going, get the activity going without engaging in all of the chatter about it. It's a hard habit to cultivate, but a really effective one as a care partner. Just stop asking whether or not, if you sense, boy, this person really needs some physical movement. It's been a while, right? Let's not make it a question or a negotiation. Let's just get it going. Lots of affirmation, reassurance, and praise. Thomas, you gave some nice examples of how you incorporated that with Lynn when she was still at home too. The person needs to feel that they cooked you a beautiful meal. There's no reason that they need to know that you actually cooked that beautiful meal, right? Providing you did a great job. Yes, this is going really nicely, right? If somebody gets up out of the chair and that was a big accomplishment for them, make note of it somehow, right? Whatever way feels good and comfortable and natural to you. We've talked about this a lot. Stay mindful of that person's level of insight, recognizing it's different for every person with dementia. Some people are very aware that things are changing with them and they will modify their activities accordingly, and some people absolutely are not. So you got to know where the person is right then in that moment. Music is one of the most effective motivators that's out there. Somebody that would otherwise not get up and get moving, you put on a piece of their favorite music. It will often do the trick without you having to do a thing. But are there other motivators, right? Snacks, pets, kids, an opportunity to see the grandkids. I can think of lots of different things that might be motivating. Most of all, and we haven't really talked about this a lot yet today, make it a team effort. And by that, I mean, you need to be a part of this too. If you want somebody to get up and get outside for a walk, if you want somebody to put on a program and do some chair yoga or some stretching or movement and motion activity, make it something that we use that kind of language. Let's do this. We need to get moving, right? Make it something that even if you're not really going to sit down and do that activity with them, make them feel like this is a thing that you are doing together. The last thing anybody of us wants is someone else kind of telling us that we need to do, I mean, frankly, anything, but someone else telling you that you need to get up and exercise. Who among us is going to respond positively to that, right? It needs to be, let's you and I get up and do this. So we'll pause here before we move on to resources for more local support. Are there any other questions, Jean, that have not been answered that have come in?
No, I think so far we are good, but for sure, if there are any questions, please send them in, folks, in the Q&A or in, you know, if it's in the chat, that's fine too. We will answer questions from chat.
We sure will. Okay, so let's wrap up by talking about where to round up the support and resources for this. We talk in just about every program we have here at Alzheimer's San Diego about the importance of having a good support system. First of all, just sort of identifying those people in your life or building a better support system if you need one, and getting them involved. A lot of us have people in our life who are saying this to us all the time, right? What do you need? How can I help? And I think that physical activity is one of the best ways that you can engage other members of the support system because it's so fun, right? It can be just something that they both share an interest in or a willingness to do. Boy, it'd be really great if you could just come, you know, every week, every 2 weeks, and just get them outside, right? Go for a walk together. Get them engaging in one of these online classes that I have found. This is a wonderful way to engage your support system. Of course, here at Alzheimer's San Diego, we have an array of programs that support physical activity. I've made mention of a few of them already, and I'm going to invite my colleague Adriana to tell you a little bit about our Virtual Alz Companions program. She's the director of that program.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So again, I'm Adriana McCullum. I'm the Director of Volunteer Programs, and I oversee the Virtual Companion Program, where volunteers will make social visits via Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or whatever video chat software you prefer, to spend time talking with your person, or it could be sharing a screen on Zoom to visit virtual museums or look at vintage music performances, really anything your person would be interested in. And it could be the volunteer spending most of the time listening to their stories, or if they need to be the one to do most of the engaging, they can do that as well. They're really striving to meet the person where they are in the disease, but to try to engage them where they can. And visits range anywhere from 15 minutes to 2 hours. Usually the longer ones are done on Zoom, where we have maybe a gentleman who loves vintage cars, and the volunteer takes him to a car museum virtually, and he can look at the cars and talk about them. And so the volunteers are trained, they're very eager, they really want to connect, they want to help, and they're really striving to meet the person where they are in the disease. So even if you're not sure it will work, we definitely would love to try it. And again, there's no standard for how these work. They could be even by phone, they could be short, they could be long. And we do have a number of volunteers who actually run through physical exercises with their person, or even speech therapy. So there's really a range of things that can be done, and really trying to meet the person, meet the needs they have.
Great.
So
yeah, we've seen some very cool examples of that. There's so many creative ways people can use these technologies to visit with each other. You could go to the exercise library on our website, share your screen and watch Danny's video together, and then do it together, right? You'd be able to see each other following along. There's so many ways that the Virtual Alz Companions can be a part of your that support system for incorporating more movement and motion. Thank you, Adriana.
Thank you.
Adriana also oversees our social activities and outings program at Alzheimer's San Diego. Of course, those are very limited right now because not too much is open, but please continue to keep an eye on our website. Look for announcements as socially, physically distanced outing opportunities come up. Adriana does a great job of coordinating those for us and finding new things wherever and whenever she can. So please keep an eye on those, visit that online exercise library, and stay in touch with all of those other types of community resources. There's many adaptive activity programs here in San Diego County. So I mentioned several of these already, but here are the actual URLs and websites where you can go to get more information. And again, we will email this slide deck out to all of you, so you can just click right to it. City of San Diego Therapeutic Recreation Services has a whole range of adaptive physical activity programs for people with disabilities. Of course, it's very limited at the moment, but those programs we hope will expand in the near future. The Feeling Fit Club, SDSU's Adaptive Fitness Clinic. Thomas, is there anything you want to, do you have an update on how that clinic is going right now?
Haven't talked to them in a while. I know dementia is not necessarily something they'll take people in to do that, but they've got a really long wait list, and just about every issue is closed right now. So
right, I didn't imagine their status was.
Yeah, even before it was. I mean, it's a great program. A lot of and it's in the name. It's adapting people to, it's kind of needs based, or things that skills people need, just life skills kind of things. But they have a really long wait list, unfortunately.
Okay. Thank you.
As long as you gave me an opportunity, Amy, I wanted to talk about one thing from the previous slide.
Sure.
It's through all. It was one of the social. This was a few years ago. One of the social activities was bowling that Adriana put together, and out of that activity, out of our own bowling group stood up, where once a week, before the bowling alley closed, we were meeting at Parkway Bowl in El Cajon to bowl together, which was fantastic. So it kind of ebbed and flowed just as people levels changed, but it was something I was really look forward to every week and look forward to doing again once the bowling alley is reopened. But a meeting in that environment to bowl, and it was, we figured out ways to do it. We learned some lessons along the way, like tell the people in the next lane that the person that next to them has dementia. Only one time was that a problem, but it was amazed how understanding people are. Like, the bowling etiquette may not be adhered to necessarily. We got to where we would tell people about it, and again, it was like one time where somebody didn't like it, but that's a great. And it was anyway. I guess I'm talking about it because I miss it, and I'm hoping that we can resume it once the bowling alley reopens. But you never know what happens out of one of Adriana's social activities, that it may grow a life of its own and something that keeps going.
That's right. Yes, please do visit that calendar that's on our website. Look back to see if there are things on the calendar in the coming months. We certainly hope to see more of that as things around the county are beginning to reopen. I really appreciate your point about just sometimes environments are not necessarily adaptive, accessible, or friendly to people with dementia, but often we can make them so. Right, talking to the business owners. Adriana does a great job of this in cultivating our social activities and outings program. What can we do to modify this tour or this event or this activity to adapt to the needs of people with memory impairment or dementia? People are often very willing to be patient and accommodating, but they have to be asked. Right, they have to know that you need that. Don't be afraid to ask. So a couple other resources here. Silver Age Yoga is a yoga program for older adults, can be easily adapted to seated yoga. They have great classes in physical locations, but they also televise it on that same county news center television station that I mentioned before. And many of you are probably familiar with Silver Sneakers, a health and fitness program that's included with a lot of different health insurance plans. So you can actually get Silver Sneakers to sort of cover your membership in gyms or participation in certain fitness programs. So check with your health insurance provider to see if you're part of that network. So finally, in conclusion, just know we have this array of support through Alzheimer's San Diego. If you don't know us, we are a local organization. We're very hands-on, service-oriented. So it's hard for us to all be working remotely right now, but we've really done a lot to adapt our programming and meet the needs of our community during the pandemic. So it will be a while yet before we're back to providing in-person programs, doing movement and motion classes in our office again, but we're going to continue doing them online, having recordings available to you, for example, for as long as we need to. So get to know our array of support and services. Don't hesitate to reach out to our social work team if you want to talk through individual ideas and strategies and how you could adapt them in your home with your person specifically. That's what they're there for. So please reach out Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5. You can reach us on our website anytime, of course, but you can reach a social worker during our business hours at that main phone number. Just say, I just need to talk to somebody. Or you can connect with our staff via live chat on our website if that feels more comfortable to you. Again, just give us a call, get in touch with Alzheimer's San Diego if you need more ideas, more suggestions, or to do some planning around getting more movement into your or your person's day-to-day life.